to Two Guys from Verona with hosts Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella. Each week, they bring you their take on the world today. Dan Perkins is a financial expert, a regular columnist for the Hill website, best-selling author, and founder of a nonprofit foundation for our injured veterans. Don Mazzella brings his years of journalism experience and insights to the world today. He's a veteran newsman currently running a series of online newsletters and magazines, and is also a book author and on the board of the National Robotic Education Foundation. Together on each program, these men will provide thought-provoking ideas and commentary on what is happening politically, financially, and socially. They will also give listeners a heads up on future happenings. We start off each program with Dan Perkins' essay on what he considers an important issue facing us.
Good evening and welcome to Two Guys from Verona. This is Dan Perkins.
I'm Don Mazzella.
And remember, you can find information about us at twoguysfromverona.com. And if you want to call in and make a comment, it's 561-623-9429. Don, I want to talk about the continued erosion and collapse of order and reason in Europe. We have a situation over the weekend where Air France told their female stewardesses who are going to be working the flights into Iran that are supposed to start again in the next month or two that they have to wear veils and cover their heads. And the stewardesses said, absolutely not. And here is a case where a private sector company, somewhat controlled by the central government in France, is trying to force on its citizens the political correctness of dealing with the Muslim faith. I find it reprehensible that in a time when we had those people killed in Paris, the people killed in Brussels, that we're talking about political correctness and they have forgotten all the people that died. It's amazing to me that we could sit there and 3 months ago, Angela Merkel gets the cover of Time magazine of the Person of the Year, and now she's vilified because she's trying to figure out a way how to get them out of her country. Their stupidity, their lack of thoughtfulness and analyzation of what was going on when they decided to open up the borders and let 800,000 people come into the country at one time with no housing, no food, no medical facilities, and to ask the German people to buckle up and provide for them. They're not learning the language. They're not becoming a part of the culture. In fact, they're trying to destroy the culture. It is a very, very bad situation. And we're within 2 weeks of a huge massacre in Brussels, Belgium, where innocent people gave up their lives because of somebody decided they wanted to prove a point about how powerful they were. If they don't get a handle on this in Europe very soon, there was a report that I saw that the police in London, and the Scotland Yard, and other international police agencies believe there are many as 10 other additional attacks that could be coming on the people in Europe. So I think it's time to say, wait a minute, you got to rethink this political correctness. I know we get this kind of pushback in the States, but in Europe, they've got serious problems. We've got serious problems. We just haven't seen them all yet. We have to stop this political correctness because it's killing people. Don?
Well, there's an old saying: if you read history and you don't react to it, you're doomed to repeat it. If you read books about the period of the 1930s and how Europe reacted to the rise of Nazism, it's amazing how congruent to our current events. Admittedly, it's a different culture, but Nazism was to many people an alien idea, but a native idea. And then at the end of World War II, don't forget, West Germany, the part of Germany that was not held by the Soviets, took in 2.5 million refugees in the period 1945 to 46 and resettled them and built the economic dynamo that Germany is today. But their industrialists are finally realizing that while the German people that they took in then were industrious and spoke the same language, the people they brought in today don't speak the language, and worse, don't want to learn the language. You're right about that. Political correctness is destroying the will to fight. But don't forget, we had the pacifism of the 20s and 30s, which almost destroyed the English Empire. It destroyed the empire, but almost England as well. So Europe has not learned its lessons, and perhaps it's time that somebody reminded them of what happened when they let a germ, in this case Nazism, permeate their societies. There was fascism in Italy, there's Nazism in Austria, there were parts of Poland, Czechoslovakia, etc. We really should be reading history again to fully understand this problem, and we get away from political correctness. But I'm afraid, Dan, we're doomed to failure.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting, Don. You make an interesting point about how we don't pay attention to our history. And somebody once said, you know, if you don't pay attention to your history, as you're saying, you're destined to repeat it. And then somebody said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over again and expecting a different outcome. It just seems to me that what's going on in Europe and what's trying to take place in the United States is the idea that we cannot continue in a society where the government tries to provide everything on behalf of the people and have the people no accountability for what's going on. I think that when you bring people in, as you pointed out, these immigrants are different than the immigrants that came out of the Second World War. Excuse me. These immigrants, as you said, are not only they're not interested in learning the language or the laws of their culture, they want to change the language, the laws, and the culture to a Muslim state. And they're very aggressive about trying to do that. I found it was amazing that people that were in the camps were trying to force the women of the towns where the camps are to change the way they dress because it was offensive to them. The idea that you can control another human being even though you're not part of the culture or the language or not even a citizen shows how aggressive these people are. Sorry about the frog in my throat, but we have to realize that we are not so secure in the United States. People talk about how the president has kept us safe. There hasn't been any attacks in the United States of magnitude, but clearly we've had situations, whether it was Fort Hood or what happened in California and other places, where terrorists are in fact attacking the United States. And we have an administration who wants to open the border even more, is not interested in deporting illegal people. They're just almost as if their frame of mind is to destroy the country. I heard a comment today that some of the people that are in the MoveOn.org and other organizations that are protesting Mr. Trump, those organizations believe that America has been racist from its very beginning. And now there's a new directive coming out of the Department of Labor. If you own an apartment complex and you have a convicted felon who wants to come in, you cannot deny him or her the right to rent your property because it will now be a racist decision. And with that, we're going to take a commercial break, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to Two Guys from Verona with Dan Perkins.
All right, you're clear,
We'll be right back after a word from their sponsors.
Well, that's because, Dan, when I take off my glasses, I can't see my
You worried about
timing. So, Dan, you're going to have to keep it going.
Hi.
I will. I'll
Joe,
watch it for you.
Listen,
Not
I
a
know
problem.
it is to find senior care.
So what are you going to do?
That's why I recommend.
I'm going to talk about Venezuela.
Okay.
And then I think we should leave the rest of the program, because by then I hope to get some results in from Wisconsin
Okay.
to give us something to talk about.
Okay.
Okay?
We'll see what happens. How's your wife?
Bad. It's a virus. Very bad virus. Unbelievably bad.
So is she going to do? We talked this afternoon. She wasn't going to go to the doctor. Is she going to go to the doctor now?
No, she's actually she's puked most of it out. She's actually on the mend.
Wow. So you think it's something that she got in the Caribbean?
No. No, I think we got it on the plane coming home.
Who did you fly?
American.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Wow. Polls close at what, 9 o'clock Central? Or, Wisconsin's, it's not Eastern time, it's Central time, right?
No, Western. Yeah.
It's Central time.
Right. I'm just, is talk radio relevant for personal branding? This is a woman that tells you how to generate leads for your book.
All right, fellas, here we go. Coming back. Y'all good?
Yep.
Participating, it's our goal to deliver 10,000 audio players this year. To learn how you can help, go to our website at songsandstoriesforsoldiers.us. Help us to help a veteran make it through the night.
Welcome back. You're listening to Two Guys from Verona. Once again, here's your hosts, Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella.
Okay, you're up. You're up, Don. If they want to call, 561-623-9429. Go, bud.
Well, I'd like to turn our attention southward for a little bit. As you know, I was on vacation last week in St. Martin, and you get a different perspective of what's going on in the world when you look at the foreign press and what they talk about. But the interesting thing was there was a report that the oil, and I know you will know a lot about this, Dan, that the oil ports of Venezuela, the waiting time or turnaround time for tankers has now stretched to 12 days from a normal 2.5 days, because of two factors. Venezuelan oil is very heavy and needs to be lightened with, I think, naphtha, and the equipment that is used to offload the oil, to load the oil, etc., mixing, all is going to pot, because Venezuela does not have the foreign exchange to buy the proper parts. And also they're running out of dollars to pay, with oil transactions are mostly paid in dollars. And they are trying to be creative with the selling their oil to barter for various things. Well, it's a sign of the deteriorating situation in Venezuela, which by the end of the year has got to explode into some sort of violence. But more importantly, or equally as important, we have the problem in Brazil, where the scandal involving Petrobras, the oil conglomerate, and the bribery, the hundreds of millions of dollars in bribes, finally coming home to roost. Well, these two events, and plus the other unseating of leftist leaders in other parts, leads that we've neglected South America, and it's going to explode. And we should be looking at down there for what you worry about, the immigrants coming over the border. I worry about the entire area, which is ripe for problems for America, starting with the next president next year. So I wanted to bring it up. Wanted your thoughts on it.
Well, I'm curious, you talking about Central America. Didn't our president, after he went to Cuba in a baseball game, didn't he go to Argentina and dance the tango?
Well, that should be enough to hold it off till he leaves office.
Okay, so that's his foreign policy. Go to baseball games and tango with the ladies.
Well, it's unfortunate that that's the case because Latin America and South America represent the new wave. The Pope is from South America, and a majority of the new Catholics in this world are coming from Africa and South America. Right. But unfortunately for the Catholic Church and for America, there's a wave of young people who are not taking to religion the way their parents did. Right. We've got a lot of problems facing us that we're ignoring in the national media, and I want to bring it up because this program should be talking about what's going to happen. And clearly, in the next few months, we are going to see some major explosions. Venezuela is reaching the end point. The socialist government or communist government, I think more likely, has spent all it can to legitimize itself, and it hasn't worked. The interesting thing, Rhodesia and Kenya, as you know, in Africa, where when their colonial rule ended, all the white farmers were evicted from their land, and it's taken them years. Whereas Kenya and other countries were self-sufficient in their crops, they are now importing food, and now finally it's dawned on them that maybe if they pay some of the white farmers, they can get them back on the land in order to restart agriculture. And same thing is going to happen in Argentina and other parts of South America, where for the last 30-odd years, governments have been taking land and redistributing it and leading to massive unrest. And the fact is that agricultural production has declined in South America when it should have increased. Yeah. So again, we're looking at problems, and I almost feel sometimes that we go on this program and all we talk about is problems. There used to be a radio commentator named Gabriel Heater who used to say, "There's news tonight," and when there was good news, he'd say, "There's good news tonight." But we haven't been able to say good news in a long time, Dan.
No, and probably close to 7.5 years. Let me go back to your Venezuela scenario. In another life, in another career, I used to supply the hoses that are used to load and unload tankers. They're called OS&D, or oil suction and discharge hoses. And I did that in the oil business in the United States. The problem that Venezuela is having, Don, is that they're a member of OPEC. And what's happening is that the OPEC nations, who've had a cartel and control of the price of crude oil for most of 40 years, are finding that they not only have they lost control of the oil markets, they find themselves in a situation where their economies are suffering because the amount of money they need. I saw it today that Saudi Arabia now, in order to make up the shortfall in their budget, in other words, for them to balance their budget, they need $105 a barrel for crude oil. It's trading at 37. So the hope was last year that when they were $150 billion short, that prices would rise, and they have gone up some, but not anywhere near their lift costs. So Saudi Arabia is getting less and less revenue, but so are all the OPEC partners. The smaller partners and the weak partners like Venezuela have no leverage against Saudi Arabia, or for that matter, Iran, because they have, as you pointed out, no money. They don't have money to pay. Their unstable government is not allowing people to come in. People don't want to come in and work because they're afraid that they'll never get paid or they'll be nationalized. or they'll be arrested into forced labor. So it's a very, very unstable situation, and it really is a function of the price of crude oil. Now, we thought in March that they were going to meet in April and talk about some kind of a stabilized price, but that seems to have waned. It seems every time that the OPEC nations want to make a decision, they kind of back away from it. Every day that we go through this $35 to $40 oil patch price, every day, more and more revenue is lost to the OPEC nations and becomes less and less that they can do for their people, and the people will become more and more dissatisfied. When you're used to getting an income based on the price of a barrel of oil in Saudi Arabia, if you're a true Saudi citizen and you don't have to work, now all of a sudden you found that your income is coming down. The government's announced last month that they're going to start to cut significant amount of services to the people in the country, and they're looking for ways to try and diversify their economy away from oil. Well, they're only about 3 years or less away from being bankrupt. Saudi Arabia is probably 18 months, or Russia's probably 18 months from bankruptcy, and your Venezuela is on the verge of bankruptcy right now. There are rolling blackouts in that part of the world, to where we find in Venezuela, in the capital cities, they're now talking about cutting off all electrical power for up to 30 days to the city. Can you imagine what would happen in the capital city if they had no electrical power for 30 days? The chaos and the unbelievable challenges that are going to take place for those people. It's going to be a very, very difficult, it's going to be a very hot summer, and I think that it's going to be a situation that's going to be driven by oil. And if oil does not recover close to $50 to $60 a barrel by summertime, we're going to see another big jump down in the price of gasoline, because the American refineries are awash with gasoline, and they're going to have to bring the price down in order. So we may see lower prices, even though the price of crude oil has gotten higher. And we're coming up on that 23-minute break. So we'll be back in a few moments. Stay listening.
You're listening to Two Guys from Verona with Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella.
So what do you want to do now? We're 23 after the hour.
I still haven't seen anything from any of my sources. I asked a couple of my sources to give me by 8:30. Can't find my glasses. By 8:30, so we could get into it. And I don't see anybody coming through yet.
They're ready to close in and capture the Brotherhood. The president tells them just.
So what do you want to do?
The president develops.
You want me to start?
I think we should go with Hillary and Bernie, and then Trump and
succeed.
Trump and Cruz.
So the third segment you want to do is on what's happening in Wisconsin. Even though we don't know the outcome.
I want to do what we did on Jim's show. I think that the bit that you found about her various money laundering schemes, I think it's fascinating, and I think you should break it on this show.
Okay.
And I think that's the most important thing you could do.
Okay. So we'll do that. You occasionally check your screen and see what's going on. If you've got breaking news, just let me know.
Yeah, I'm waiting for somebody I know is going to try to give us an advance word of who's going to of the Fox who's ever going to call the races.
Okay.
They pretty much know by now who's going to win.
Okay, we got less than a minute to our next segment.
Mom or Dad, there's a place for answers, a place for Mom.
Call a place for Mom in the next 10 minutes to get your free book on financing senior care.
Good to go.
Information on senior living community.
Call 1-800-750-6128. That's 1-800-750-6128.
Welcome back. You're listening to Two Guys from Verona. Once again, here's your hosts, Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella.
Well, Don, we've got the Wisconsin primary going on right now as we talk, and we haven't talked about the campaigns per se for a few weeks. So let's spend a few minutes and talk about what your thoughts are on the leaders on both Democrat and Republican side, and then we'll have an opportunity for me to give my 2 cents worth.
Your 2 cents this week is going to be really interesting. But as I say, as I've been saying, this presidential race is not over. I believe we have 2 or 3 zigs and zags to come. I still believe, as I've often said, that I towards the end, I do not believe Hillary Clinton will end up being the Democratic presidential nominee. If she is, I have a lot of egg on my face, but I'll take it.
That's for sure.
It's how I feel. I feel very strongly, and you see some of the gaffes she makes. If a Republican candidate had made the gaffes that she did, they would be all over her. As you pointed out about Sunday, her comments about abortion and calling the fetus what it is, a living, breathing person. If you're Catholic, as I am, but that violates. I love your description. I'll leave that to you. But there's other things happening to Hillary Clinton that have me a little bit surprised that people haven't picked up on it. In the morning and late at night, she's dragging, as anybody would at her age. And let's not talk about I know she's younger than I am, but she's not that much younger than me. And towards the end of the night, I get dragged a little bit. But as someone has said, the presidency is one of the most draining jobs anybody ever had. And as you point out, President Obama looks much different today than when he went into office 7.5 years ago. And if you look at the pictures of most of our presidents, with the exception, I went back and looked. The only president that really looked better when he left the White House than before was Teddy Roosevelt. He went off on a safari afterwards. Very interesting. But the other president, even Harry Truman, who I think was one of our greatly unappreciated presidents, looked harried at the end of it. And here we have a woman who's been after this job now 12 years. If you think about it, 12, maybe even 16 years. And she's finally closing in, yet her speeches are uninspiring. And when you put them up against Bernie Sanders, you got a man who's older than me, older than her, and yet he seems to be each day more vital and happier than his opponent. Then we have Donald Trump on the other side, who's Donald Trump, and we'll leave it at that. You have Cruz, who someone said to me just a few minutes ago in an email, is the angry young man of the Senate who doesn't know what he's really angry at. And I thought that was a very interesting point that was made. And then, as you well know, I prefer of all of them Governor Kasich and I think he's probably the one that seems to be enjoying this race more than any other person. The other thing that I want to bring, and I'm talking a long time, but I'll stop here, is that none of these candidates outside of Bernie really looks happy. You ever think about that? You know, whatever you had to say about Hubert Humphrey, he looked happy. He was called a happy warrior, and whenever he campaigned, he was happy. And he really enjoyed the people. If you look at the various things, these candidates do not look happy. And I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Don. I want to make a couple of quick observations. I started on this program maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago raising the question about whether or not Hillary is physically capable of handling the presidency. And I question whether or not, given the we call them gaffes, but I think we have to look at them differently than a gaffe. Here, I'm going to give you quick 4 examples of where this woman has departed from what supposedly has been her life, more than 16 years. At the Nancy Reagan funeral, she talked about how much support Ronald Reagan was to the gay community, and the gay community was outraged with her. Then she went on 2 days later to talk about the coal industry and how she was going to put miners and mines out of work. And that's a union. Coal Miners Union is one of the principal Democratic bastions of support for Democrats for president. Yet she trashed them. The next night, she talks about how no Americans lost their lives in Benghazi. And that was a falsehood. And yet, most recently, she was on one of the Sunday news shows, albeit recorded, and she committed a mortal sin, Don, a mortal sin in the Catholic Church. She committed a mortal sin in the abortion movement. So much so that Planned Parenthood came out and criticized her dramatically about what she said. See, there are things that are spoken and there are things that are unspoken. And when it comes to dealing with abortion, and by the way, more than Catholics are opposed to abortion, Don, I believe. One of the two things that are sacrosanct that you don't mention when you talk about abortion is a person or a child. Yet, on Sunday, she's talking about abortion of a child or what are the legal rights of an unborn person. Planned Parenthood went berserk on her. So there's a gaffe, but when you're doing something that supposedly you've been doing for all of your life in areas of unions, of women's rights, women's health, and gay community, and you can't get the story straight, then there's got to be something wrong. I suggested, and I continue to believe, that I think there's something wrong with her mental capacity. Now, when I was speaking to my old friend, and I say old on the other end of this microphone yesterday about it, he said, do you remember your mother repeating things every other day that she didn't realize that she had said them the day before? I said, yes, I did. It's a sign of age. I'm concerned that if she can't remember what her promises were to Planned Parenthood, how is she going to remember what promises she's making to the leaders of the world? Is she mentally fit and mentally capable to be president of the United States? I am raising very serious questions about it. Now to the game that she's playing. Bernie Sanders, if he looked back on his campaign, if he was sitting in a hotel room tonight, even if he wins Wisconsin, in his heart of hearts, he's going to look back and he's going to say, boy, did I screw up. I give Hillary a free pass for the first 3 to 4 months of the campaign. I never challenged her. I said she was tired of hearing about her damn emails. He's going to look back and say that was a mistake. She's locked up a lot of the superdelegates. If you take the superdelegates out, the races are pretty close. How did she get the superdelegates? Nobody asked that question. Well, I found the answer, how she got the superdelegates. What happened was that she set up a PAC, the Hillary Victory PAC. And under PAC contributions, you don't have the same limitations that you have of individuals giving to specific candidates for their campaign. What happened was the PAC went out and raised money, and because it was a PAC, they found a way in which an individual could contribute, and his spouse, 2 people in a household, could contribute not $9,000, but $660,000 to the Hillary PAC. Then the money was flowed from the Hillary PAC to the Democratic National Committee, which then was given money to give to the states that were in financial difficulty, and then money flowed to the Hillary campaign, and the treasurer, the chief financial officer of the Hillary campaign, decided which candidates running for office today or some point in the future would receive the largesse of Mrs. Clinton's money that she raised. So I was saying earlier, back when I was in high school, we had a problem where disc jockeys were being paid to play 45 records on the air to sell more records. They called it payola. Today, I guess we would call it, in the case of what Mrs. Clinton's doing, is money laundering. And if you look at it, it's a very similar deal that what she did and Bill did with the Clinton Foundation. They formed another foundation in Canada, channeled money from individuals from all over the world into the the foundation in Canada, and then that foundation, which didn't have to report who the contributors were, made contributions to the Clinton Foundation in the United States. So they were aggregating money on behalf of the Clintons and sending it to the foundation, and then the Clintons were taking the money out for their own personal benefit. These people should be working on Wall Street and putting deals together. They could compete with Mr. Trump in structuring deals. But the point is, these shenanigans are going on, and this is how she has locked up, I believe, a significant number of superdelegates and superdelegates who haven't even been selected yet or voted in the primaries yet to come, meaning New York for one of those. So I think it's a very interesting program, a very interesting scheme they put together. Not saying it's illegal, but showing how they've manipulated the system to their advantage once again. And I think that perhaps it might become an issue, and it might become a campaign issue, although you don't think she's going to be the nominee. But off the off chance that you might be wrong, maybe somebody will bring it up in the fall campaign. As it relates to Mr. Trump, I like Mr. Trump. I like his candor. There's a great piece that was on Drudge today, a piece written by James Buchanan, who was a presidential candidate a number of years ago, talking about what's different about Trump and the fact that he's a nationalist, not a Republican or a Democrat. Really good piece. I would encourage all of our listeners to read it because it's very insightful. Cruz, yes, angry man. Does he know what he's angry about? I think he does. I think he knows. I think he believes in his heart of heart that Washington is a corrupt city. Both Democrat and Republican leadership are corrupt, and they're emboldened to the donor class and to the polling class and the the consulting class and all those different classes for their income. And he thinks that that's the wrong thing to do. I just think that and Kasich, I'm sorry, the guy's 1 for 31. I mean, how the Republican Party could select John Kasich to run when he won one primary. Based on the rules, at least the current rules, I think it's 42 or 43, you have had won 8 primaries even to be considered on the first ballot for a candidate. So he hasn't met that. We got about 40 seconds. You can go ahead.
Well, I was just going to tell you that I got an invitation today to be a delegate to the Democratic National Convention. Don't ask me where they got my name from, but they said if I wanted to sign up, this is what I had to do.
How much money do they want? How much money do they want?
I don't know. I didn't go past that point.
Okay.
I just read the thing. I thought it was funny. Everything you say has veracity as usual, Dan. I just point out that we're in a sad state of this country right now, in the paucity of really good candidates. And I worry for the Republic, but as I said a couple of weeks ago, after seeing those young people, I do believe the Republic will survive, despite everything else.
Okay, we got to take a break. We'll be back in a little bit.
You're listening to Two Guys.
Any news?
Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella.
You're clear.
We'll be right back.
Any news?
What?
Did you hear anything from Wisconsin?
Not yet. Not yet. Hold on a second. Can't see the screen anymore without my glasses. If we want to go, it says can't confirm, but I think we should say we can say we think this is how it's. Why don't we ask for predictions about it? And we both say Cruz, Trump, Kasich, and Rubio.
Okay. Or we can give the people a right to vote by going to the email at host@twoguysfromverona.com and leave us their email vote.
No, I haven't gotten any. I haven't gotten any emails from there. Have you?
No, I'm not sure that it's working yet. Remember that discussion?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you can't have them go to it and not report it. That would not. This would not. It's not the right thing.
Okay, we'll pass it. We're coming up here real quick.
That's
fellas, putting me back in here.
www.danperkins@sanibel.com. Dan Perkins' new book, also available at Amazon.com.
In this final segment, Don and Dan offer their predictions on what's going to happen in our world.
Okay, Mr. Predictor, what do you think is going to happen in Wisconsin?
Well, it's still polls are still a little ways off, but I think Cruz is going to win, but not by the 10 points that everybody's saying. They're going to be closer. I think that Donald Trump will suffer. The papers and the media will call it a defeat, but still in all, given everything. And don't forget, he does not have the people on the ground in Wisconsin that he had other places, and not to the extent that Cruz and Governor Walker there have put together. So it's going to be closer, and it's going to show that his message is still strong. And by the way, I have to point out an interesting thing here in New Jersey, which is very much a Democratic state. The number of Trump bumper stickers I've seen has greatly surprised me. And there's actually an article in yesterday's paper saying that Trump may take New Jersey if he's the presidential nominee. But then going back, it's Cruz, Trump, Kissick, and then bringing up the rear, hobbling along Rubio.
Right.
That's how I think it'll end up.
Let me. We got a little bit of time. Let me ask you a theoretical question here. Some of the candidates, Carson, Rubio, and others, have small numbers of delegates that they've won, that have agreed to vote for them on the first ballot. Let's say that, I know it's hard to believe that Don could be wrong, but let's just assume that Don is wrong. And we go in about 3 weeks before Cleveland, and the number of distributed delegates between Rubio and other people are the difference to give Trump the nomination before the convention. One, do you think there'll be horse trading for it, that he'll get them, or not?
Oh, yes, there'll definitely be. When you're that close, political history dictates that a horse trading be done. And maybe people can get a favorite plank or a promise of a position. It's really interesting. The conventions that I've attended, the most interesting thing is the horse trading for the lower positions. There's a wonderful old saying, little men stand till the big men get their seats. And in this case, the little men may have a little bearing on it. So there will be horse trading if he's close.
Right. You speak about that. One of my favorite subjects is studying Abraham Lincoln, and I saw read a great deal of information on the convention when he was first nominated, and the horse trading that was going on in the back room, and he told his operatives, make no promises, but they went out and literally promised the world to everybody to try and get them to vote for him.
They had to.
I think that there could be an interesting backstory here in Wisconsin. Everybody thought, if you think about it, you said Cruz had a better ground game. He had the governor of the state on his side, and that he, at some polls, had him up 10%. If it's a close race, if it's, I think, within 3 or 4 points, I think it's going to be a disappointment for Cruz. Yes, he's going to be able to say he won Wisconsin, but what happened to the 10-point lead, 11-point lead?
Let me address that. That 10-point lead never existed in the internal polling of either the Republicans or the Democrats. It's always been a 3 or 4 or 5% difference. Because don't forget, the most it's been in the internal, the real polling by the people that I trust. The highest it's been, it was 7, and then that was leaked, and then they added the 10. But don't forget, the number has never been at 10%. And again, here we have the media saying one thing and the professionals thinking another.
Are you saying that the media is not professional? They didn't get their numbers right?
I'm saying the media hyped it.
Oh, I see. Okay. So
they hyped it. Those that were for Trump hyped it, and those that are against it hyped it in the hopes that he doesn't hit the 10%. Because every poll I've seen,
if it's 3 to 5 points, what's the margin of error? 3 points? 2 points?
Pretty much under 2 points.
So
those are the surveys where they really cut down on the variance in various ways. So,
so
that was a true number.
Yeah. So that if it's 3 points, 4 points, it's within the margin of error, but it doesn't look, even though the media are not professionals, the media has been hyping how devastating a significant loss would be for Trump in Wisconsin. If it's a marginal victory for Cruz, yes, I agree with you, it's a victory, but they're not going to be able to pump out their chest and say that the tide is turned against Trump. I don't believe that's going to be true.
Don't forget, there's 2 games going on. There's the media game that's being played out, and then there's the internal political game. And what I'm talking about is the political game. Mm-hmm. If Cruz wins by 4 or 5, then the political game is still in, because that's what they expected him to win.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the media has put up another expectation number. So let you and I deal with it as what's the real number, what is perceived by my sources as the real number, and say if he hits 5, the game is still on. If it barely edges under 2, then we'll talk differently. But you got to understand, the numbers out there in the public are not the numbers that the politicians are looking at. And if you put it over on the Clinton Saunders side, the numbers are much closer. Saunders is really demonstrating, and if as you demonstrated earlier with the with how she's holding the super delegates, she's not doing a good job out there with the people. And the numbers that say that she's devastating any Republican candidate is not what the internal polls are showing by the Republican or the Democratic side. That's why we've been talking about 2 different things: the public world and the private world, and that's what I've been basing most of what I've been saying on the private world.
So, believe it or not, we're out of time. So, Don, thank you. And we'll see you next week. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. And remember, if it's important to you, it's important to us. And thanks for listening. For 2 Guys from Verona, this is Dan Perkins.
And Don Mazzella, thank you.
You've been listening to 2 Guys from Verona with Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella.
There you go,
Dan
fellas.
Don, please visit 2guysfromverona.com.
Good, thank you.
Sweet. To hear 2 Guys from Verona.
Dan, I'll take a listen to last week's show. I don't think you guys were talking over the ad, but I'll still go back and listen to all of
America.
Okay.
the ads.
All right. So how much in advance do you need to get the commercials from us and the script to get things set up for next week?
Well, I don't know, at least maybe a day, because I'm pretty much always, doing a show or doing something.
Okay. So we'll work on trying to get something